A black store owner in California was harassed by police who were not convinced that he owned his own clothing store. So now this happened in Tiburon, California. And a local news station, ABC7, had reported that Yima Khalif, owner of the Yima clothing brand and store, was approached by local police while he was working late inside his business around 1 a.m. last Saturday. So now he told ABC7, quote, this particular day, we had just received a huge inventory. We just wanted to come out and put the inventory out before Saturday morning. Well, that makes sense. Again, if you're running a business, yeah, you would want your inventory to be accessible. And yeah, if you've got nothing to do on a Friday night, why not? Okay, it's your business. Pretty much do whatever you want as long as you're not breaking any laws, right? But of course, that seemed to be too much for police, who immediately suspected that he was looting. So now there's video of this, but unfortunately, because of copyright issues, dealing with local news, we're not able to show you that video, which is unfortunate. But basically, that video has the officer saying, this street closes at 9 and there's never anybody in here. This isn't regular business hours. There's no customers in there. Is it your store? That's all we want to know. I want to know what you're doing in the store at 1 o'clock in the morning. So basically, they're demanding, hey, what are you doing here? This can't be your store, right? And he says, well, if I tell you it's my store, well, then what are you going to do? And then that's when the officer demanded to see proof. Well, then show me it's your store. Khalif responded, I don't have to show you anything. The officer then tells Khalif that he should be, quote, grateful that we're being as diligent as we are to look out for the street. And then, thankfully, of course, this does not, lead to any arrests or any violence or, God forbid, anybody getting shot. They did go away after a neighbor finally said, that's his store. Leave him alone. I wonder if that neighbor was white, by the way. So look, I know some of you might be wondering, okay, hey, why didn't you just show him proof, right? It would have been easy for him to go and show him, hey, this is my store. It's literally named after me. Here's my ID, whatever, right? But that's not really the point, right? Why should you have to do that? I mean, like the assumption here, and this is the problem, the assumption here is that the black man in a store at 1 o'clock in the morning, well, it must not be his store. He must be up to no good. Well, wait. Would this happen to a white person in the same circumstances? I don't think that'd be the case. I mean, understand, that's an example of white privilege, okay? And so I know it's one of those charged words, right? Phrases, right? That immediately triggers some people, right? Oh, how dare you say we have privilege? But wait a minute. You do, in the fact that you have the benefit of the doubt. It doesn't mean that you're, that you grow up and that you have things that are handed to you, like you grow up wealthy and you don't have any issues and, things like that. No, white privilege just means you get the benefit of the doubt, which means that people don't have certain assumptions when they see you on the street, right? When they don't have a certain image of you, when you're walking down the halls, or when you get into an elevator, where a woman doesn't have to feel like she has to, clench her purse a little tighter, things like that. Okay. And so understand that police look at black people differently than they do white people. And that even counts for black police officers. And a lot of this has to do, of course, with the training. And so now, of course, other people will point out, hey, look, it's because black people happen to be more criminally inclined. Therefore, the police are more likely to look at them as if they're doing, if they're up to no good. Okay. So now there are statistics out there that do show that black people tend to commit more crimes than white people as a share of the population, right? But whenever that is presented, there's a lot of context that gets ignored. Okay. And of course, that's on purpose in order to paint black people as more criminal, inherently violent and criminal and things like that. And so now let me point out some of that context, right? That's important. For example, where you grow up, right? If you grow up in a place that's cash strapped, and it doesn't have opportunity, well, you don't have as many options. Poorer areas mean poorer schools. Poorer schools means less ability to advance in society, lack of decent jobs in areas with poor infrastructure. And of course, you have the demand for drugs, leading, of course, to more criminality for people to get by. I mean, think about this, right? Your options are in a certain area making minimum wage at McDonald's, right? While watching your mom, work 2 jobs or 3 jobs to get by minimum wage, still not being able to do so, having health problems, and you think, well, am I just going to go get a job at McDonald's and try to support my family, or am I going to sell drugs where I make 5 times as much and there's a demand for it? I mean, it comes down to simple economics at this point, right? And then you get, some people get into that life and it's very, very difficult to get out. And so there's that. There's criminality. There's, as a result of more criminality, there's increased policing, which leads, of course, to more arrests. And it's been proven that, of course, Black people tend to get more harsher sentences, which means more people in prison, which means also more people rotating in and out of prison for crimes like possession and all that stuff, on and on and on. And you've got different contexts for different people in different situations, and if you don't involve that context, and this is why it's important to bring that up, if you don't believe in that, bringing in that kind of context and only say, well, we've got statistics saying that Black people are more violent and more criminal, well, then what's your explanation for it if you don't involve that context? Well, I think a lot of people who present it without context, knowingly so, will try to point out a genetic factor, right? And they'll try to say things like, they're just more predisposed to crime. That's it. Because they're genetically, and then they'll go down this road that you don't want to go down, right? And those people are white supremacists. And so understand that, right? And there is, unfortunately, white supremacy in policing. And so that's another huge problem. But as far as Yima is concerned, this guy's a small business owner, a pillar of the community. He's a job creator. Okay. And so, unfortunately, though, police seem to see him as a potential criminal. And they say that, and it's just a gall to say that, yeah, you know what, you should be grateful that we're paying such attention, that we care enough to go and harass you in your own store for doing your own thing. And so, look, here's the thing. I've come to the realization, over the last few months, and I know maybe I was being a little naive, but cops aren't there to protect people. Cops are there to protect property, and that's it. They also, by the way, only solve a very small amount of crime. I mean, the data shows that consistently over the decades, fewer than half of all serious crimes are reported to police. And if so, few, if any, arrests are made in those cases. About 11% of all serious crimes result in an arrest and about 2% in a conviction. As I said before, half of all crimes are not reported. And arrests, let's be honest, are not a great metric of solving crime. And I actually think that outcomes are far more important, far more interesting to look at when it comes to policing, right? And so those are important caveats, right? But really, when you look at the data, it kind of calls into question what the purpose of policing really is. Why should we pump so much money into these police, outfits if they're really barely solving any crime? You look at this result. I mean, why? Why should we justify the billions of dollars going to these police departments when we see the outcome, which happens to be, primarily harassing and killing Black people in their own communities? And so, again, they don't solve crimes. Out of all serious crimes reported to police, only 4.1% of cases ended with an individual convicted in the wake of a police reported crime. So what are they there for? You could say, hey, there's some prevention, right? Okay, but where's the numbers for that? Like, I'm interested in the data here, okay? But again, I think the real reason is, for one, to protect property, to defend the elites, and in some cases, promote white supremacy. I mean, another story that we'll get into, right? Where police worked with right wing militias, white supremacist groups to shut down black protests that were peaceful. The cops would take the side of these right wing armed militias instead of trying to protect the protesters. And so they were actively against, and understand, peaceful protesters, right? Where they constantly shut down peaceful protest. That's a nuanced conversation, right? And that's a further conversation that we need to look into further. But as far as Yuma is concerned, the state of our policing today and the state of our news today, I'm just glad that he didn't get arrested for the number one crime in America, and that it would be disrespecting a police officer.